Hello, and welcome to this edition of NACD's BoardVision. I'm Ken Daly. I'm joined today by Cindy Fornelli, Executive Director of the Center for Audit Quality. Hello, Cindy.
Hi, Ken. Thanks for having me.
We're here today to discuss the Anti-Fraud Collaboration's latest report. And as most of us know, I guess listening in, the CAQ and the NACD were founding members of the collaboration. Do you think that financial reporting fraud is still an issue? I have heard people say, well, geez, that's behind us all now.
You know, it's interesting when we look at it, we find that 9% of occupational frauds within companies are around financial reporting. So that doesn't seem like a big number, and so it might be easy to say, well, okay, so that's not the biggest issue around fraud. But when you think about it, I think that statistics show that the median loss to a company is $1 million. And then when you add on to that the reputational risk, the potential criminal risk that can attach to that, it does become a much bigger issue. So maybe the sheer number of frauds has fallen steady or actually decreased, but the impact is still so large and it's such an important issue that we've just got to keep fighting it.
And sometimes I think the definition of fraud may be awfully narrow. There's lots of things going on that perhaps don't meet the classic definition of fraud, but a close cousin, I suspect.
Well, I think that's right. And the other thing that I think is important to think about is that, you know, if we can nip this in the bud early on so that bad behavior or questionable behavior that can arise from the fraud triangle, whether it's pressure or opportunity, if you can identify that earlier on, then it won't even turn into a fraud, which I think, of course, is everybody's goal, is that you wouldn't have frauds. And so identifying that behavior that could lead to a fraud is what I think would behoove all of us.
You described the fraud triangle. Tell us, what is the fraud triangle?
This was put forth originally by a 20th century criminologist, and he identified the 3 factors that, if they're present, can lead to an opportunity for fraud or can heighten a risk of fraud. And the first one is pressure. So is the person feeling pressure to make numbers or to get their bonus? And so some kind of pressure within the company to do better. The second one is opportunity. So are there weak controls? Is he or she able to override those controls? Is there a lax environment and not good supervision? And then the last one is rationalization, which I think, as all of these are human nature traits. And that is, you know what, this is good for the company. I'm not hurting anybody. I'll make this up the next quarter. So if those 3 things are present, those 3 conditions are present, you're much more likely to find the opportunity for fraud. Or to flip it around, if you can combat those 3 characteristics or conditions, you'll have a much more fraud-resistant organization.
It's clear if the incentives are a bonus or perhaps to meet the earnings estimates of the analysts. But also the report seems to get at, and I certainly have heard, that the incentives can be nothing more than you want to look good or you want the company to look good. Is that so?
I think that's right. I think that's part of the pressure, is to make the company look good. To make shareholders perform better, the company perform better so shareholders get a better value. Maybe to lower the cost of the goods if you're a manufacturing company so that the product is more affordable. But you know, it's interesting, you mentioned the performance, and I think another opportunity that companies should think of and should take advantage of is the performance evaluation. Imagine how impactful it would be, not only that your incentives are aligned to do the right thing, but in your performance evaluation, your boss told you, we want you to do the right thing. We want you to come forward if you see something that concerns you. It doesn't even have to be a problem, just something that doesn't feel quite right. It seems that that's a time when employees are all ears, They're trying to understand what's expected of them, and that could be a great opportunity to have that conversation. I don't think it's the only place that that conversation should be had, but I think that it's a good opportunity.
I have heard people describe that you have to find ways to evangelize your culture, and that because the culture on a global basis can be a heck of a lot different than it is in your backyard, that is particularly difficult sometimes. Have you found that?
We have. And so let's just take for a moment an Asian culture where it's very hierarchical and very respectful of your superiors. That would be a difficult situation in a whistleblower, right? That kind of employee that sees their superior doing something questionable isn't going to go blow the whistle. So if you have other senior people in the company talking about the importance of coming forward when you see something, that can overcome that cultural bias.
Cindy, thank you. On behalf of the Center for Audit Quality and the National Association of Corporate Directors, thanks for looking at this edition of NACD's BoardVision.